As far as movies are concerned, we've seen some absurd tenant laws put into place. From cutting off electricity or water supply to asking a tenant to leave whenever the landlord pleases. Though these laws make for good plot twisters, tenants do actually have more rights on their leased properties. So then what are your rights as a tenant? While every state has different tenant laws, most of these are standardized. But first of all, you have equal say in the matters of the household once you have signed legal documents for renting the house. This may come as a surprise to most people, but a tenant does reserve the right to look into the maintenance of the property along with the owner. It is a classic movie plot to see the landlord enter the property while the tenants are unaware of his arrival. But this does not run in real life. The landlord cannot enter the property unless he's given you prior notice in writing. Now, even after the notice, the landlord can only enter the premises between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. according to the Model Tenancy Act. While it only seems fair that the non-payment of rent should allow the landlord to cut off essential supplies such as electricity, sanitary services, and water supply, it is not ethical and the landlord may be levied to a penalty by the local rent authority along with the tenant for non-payment. We all know that sometimes landlords glorify their worn and torn houses to find a tenant, but if the price of maintenance of the house crosses 50% of the agreed rent, the house is declared uninhabitable, in which case the tenant is allowed to vacate the property with just a 15-day notice. The landlord is obligated to inform the tenant 3 months in advance if there is a change in the rent agreement. Otherwise, the tenant can approach rent authorities to look into the matter. The draft model tenancy deems it unlawful to charge a security deposit that is 3 times the monthly rent. The rate of security deposits are also determined by the state laws just as rent charges. The security deposit should be refunded to the tenant within a month of vacating the premises, otherwise the landlord can be taken up for trial and has to pay a penalty. Are bachelors not allowed to rent houses? It's a common practice in Indian societies to deny housing to bachelors, but this is a common malpractice. According to the law, a landlord cannot discriminate on the basis of gender, sexuality, religion, or marital status of a person. In Indian complexes, though, these rules are broken and bended according to their own will. But if a landlord refuses to rent you the house on the basis of any of these premises, you are allowed to seek legal action. Informing the landlord that you are familiar with this law ensures that there is no malpractice of the sort. Along with renting the house to a bachelor comes yet another issue that landlords pick on: the entry of guests of the opposite sex. Landlords, in the rare case that they do lease the house to a bachelor, put forth various rules and regulations of their own. But even for bachelor tenants, as long as they pay their rent, the landlord cannot define who should be their guest, what they should wear, what time they can enter and leave the society, and what kind of food habits they have. Making these rules violates the individual rights of the tenants, which allows the tenant to appeal to the court and get compensation for these absurdities. But keep in mind that Indian complexes usually have this kind of policing coming from all ends, not just with the landlord but also with other residents. It can get hard to maneuver through. As a single tenant, maintaining your individuality is just as important. Tailoring your habits according to made-up rules can be hard. So if the society gangs up against you or threatens to have you evicted on these grounds, you are allowed to file a harassment case and gain compensation for the same. Wondering when it's fair to be evicted? Let me tell you. If a tenant does not pay his rent for over 2 months, the landlord can legally evict him and charge double the rent as a penalty fee. A tenant can also be evicted in cases of disappearance for long intervals, partaking in illegal activities in the house, or creating a public nuisance such as loud music, screaming, etc. While these tenant laws are extremely helpful and consider the struggle of the tenants as well, they don't help in the social life you take on in the society. Nosy neighbors and pestering old people come as a huge part of leasing a house. So what do you do when you face these people? Be friendly, talk to them as neighbors and friends. They are your next door help at the end of the day. Maintain your relationships and be courteous. The more you keep to yourself, the more you cause suspicion and raises a lot more questions. So tenants, keep in mind that your landlords are not your final bosses. Read through your rights as a tenant and be thoroughly informed. And use these rights whenever you feel like something is wrong or out of order.